before we talk about those permutations, let's just touch on the Argentina-Australia game. Argentina running the Aussies pretty close.
They did indeed. It was such a disappointing crowd at the Gold Coast. They're talking about a crisis in Australian rugby. I think that the crowd was something like, did I hear correctly, 14 or 15,000, which is absolutely pathetic for a test match.
Yeah.
It does tell you that perhaps the Australian public, among others, haven't yet warmed to this idea of Argentina being in the competition. Perhaps still a perception, a little bit unfairly, that strength versus strength really lies in the sort of the big three Sanzar powers, and that anybody else is kind of the sort of midget, if you like, on the outside that shouldn't perhaps be there, which I think is an unfortunate perception, because the Pumas more and more are running teams close. They're not, put it this way, they're taking more sort of 7-point or within 7-point defeats than they are 40-point losses. So they're, it's not like sort of when Italy first came into the Six Nations, I think they were exposed and took some quite nasty scorelines at first. And then, we quickly realized that they are still probably the weak link, but are still capable of running any team close, and even on the odd occasion beating a sort of a big gun. And eventually that will come for the Pumas. I think one day they're going to have one of those massive scrummaging performances in front of their home sort of, quite volatile, passionate crowd, and they will eventually knock over one of the Sanzar teams. They've got a couple of home games coming up now, so they'll just be the hope that they can pull something out. But maybe we're still going to have to wait until next year for that elusive first Pumas win.
Talking about the crowds, Rob, I mean, is it not also because in Australia rugby union isn't as big as your AFL and rugby league?
Yes, very much so. It is a problem. So it's only perhaps really for those, the ARU will probably only for sort of expect to get really big crowds.
I mean, particularly in your sort of otherwise venues like the Gold Coast.
Yeah, that's right. I suppose you have to sort of put a toe in the water. You have to sometimes just sort of, take the game to areas that aren't the traditional strongholds, especially if you're wanting to sort of build up your number of Super Rugby franchises. I mean, I'm not sure where Super Rugby will ever end. Will we end up at a Super 28 or a Super 37? You just don't know. So everybody's always interested in sort of trying to create a Super Rugby franchise somewhere. But I think for the moment it's going to be a little while before the Gold Coast comes into the equation.
Yeah, and then the log, the permutations. I mean, Argentina they've got a better record against the All Blacks in New Zealand, it seems. So I mean, the chances of them beating the All Blacks at home are unlikely. I mean, I think the All Blacks just need to win that, and they're pretty much guaranteed the trophy.
Yeah, as I say, looking at the log, if the All Blacks do win, they're pretty much guaranteed, like you say. And I expect them to win. I also expect them to make a couple of changes. They're the sort of team that will now throw Bowden Barrett in at fly, rest Aaron Cruden. They've got Marnonu out for the season, so they're going to put a Ryan Crotty in there, for example. I'm sure they'll make some changes up in their front row as well, maybe given Kevin Mialamu start, for example, rest Dane Coles. So they're not afraid to mix and match. They back the 15 that start the match, no matter who they are. And Argentina have also picked up a number of injuries, and we sort of expected that they don't have a great depth in their squad. And as the tournament goes on, their injuries are more telling, if you like, because their backup isn't as strong as the other big three teams. And I still think that match against the Wallabies this weekend, the scoreline flattered Argentina a little bit. Australia did all the attacking. Sure, they almost lost in the end, but it did take sort of like a second half, last 20 minutes, massive comeback by Argentina, and the Wallaby coach, Ewan McKenzie, was filthy with his team, and I certainly think they'll be practicing that this weekend. Maybe a little bit of fitness concern there, that they'll play for the full 80 minutes, and I expect them to do that certainly against the Springboks. So Argentina, actually, their coach said it was their worst performance of the tournament, and for good 60 minutes it perhaps was. And credit to Australia for certainly attacking, and they played some really good rugby and at stages in that opening half. They were sort of only hit on the break by Argentina. So Wallabies can't be counted out. They certainly are a genuine threat to beat the Springboks in Cape Town. And for the Springboks to have any chance of winning this title, they really have to pick up 5 points against both Australia and New Zealand. And I just don't see that happening. There's no reason why they should pick up 5, having not come close to scoring 4 tries against either of those two teams in their previous 2 matches. Even though they were away, these are at home. I think the Wallabies and the New Zealanders are too strong defensively to allow South Africa to score 4 tries. So I think it's sort of done and dusted the title race, unfortunately, for New Zealand, another title for them. But it's sort of the battle on for second place in the standings.
If I can just come in there, the title is officially over. The way I look at it, is that correct, Garen? I think if New Zealand get a full house against Argentina, they will go to 21 points. Then that takes out the Wallabies and the Springboks. So a full house for them, and the Rugby Championship is sealed before we come back to Ellis Park. So that is pretty much the scenario. For the Springboks to stay in the running, they need ideally for the All Blacks to lose, which is highly unlikely, but for them not to get a bonus point. And each time they've played Argentina in the Rugby Championship away, funnily enough, they have scored quite comfortably, actually, the bonus point each time. They've struggled more to beat Argentina in New Zealand, strangely, yet they somehow seem to have a knack of winning quite comfortably in Argentina. So the dice is loaded against the Wallabies and Springboks actually staying in the running.
Yeah, the All Blacks will obviously know what to do because their match will be after the Wallabies South Africa match. So if they need to just get the victory with 4 points or pick up a bonus point to secure the title, they'll certainly know what to do. And they're going to settle for a sort of a 40-30 final score. Doesn't matter if the Argentinians score 4 tries or finish within 7. As long as they sort of pick up their 4 tries, they'll be home and dry for the title this year.